In the high silence of the Central Asian steppe, where winter winds move like ancient memories across the grasslands, there is a moment, quiet, almost fragile, when the course of history bends toward a single, determined figure. For viewers who have lived long enough to sense how personal loss can shape an entire lifetime, this story begins not with glory, but with a boy standing alone on a cold field, stripped of protection, his family abandoned and betrayed. It is a beginning that would harden into purpose and eventually ignite one of the most consequential rises to power the world has ever witnessed. He was born Temujin, sometime around 1162, near the banks of the Anan River in what is now northeastern Mongolia. The land around him was rugged and open, a vast arena where nomadic tribes moved with the seasons and survival hinged on alliances as shifting as the weather. Records suggest that Temujin's early world was small, defined by his kin, his mother Hurrilan, and the weight of expectations tied to his father, Yesuje, a respected but vulnerable chief of the Borjigin clan. The boy's path might have followed the familiar rhythms of tribal life had it not been for the events that unfolded when he was still a child. According to historical accounts, Yesuje was poisoned by rivals shortly after arranging his son's future marriage. With his father gone, Temujin's family was cast out by their own clan, left to fend for themselves in the unforgiving steppe. It was a fracture that marked him. Some historians believe that this early abandonment planted the seed of a lifelong need to create unity where none existed for him, but also to pursue retribution against the injustices that had torn his world apart. As Temujin grew, he learned to hunt, gather, and survive with almost nothing. He also learned to remember. In the fractured tribal landscape of 12th century Mongolia, memory could be a weapon as sharp as any blade. By adolescence, Temujin had begun reconnecting with allies from his father's time, most notably his childhood friend Jamaka, a figure who would later become both brother and bitter rival. Their bond, as some records suggest, was once so close that they swore an oath of Anda, sacred companions. Yet adulthood carried expectations of power, authority, and rank, and the two young men found themselves walking diverging paths. While Jamaka leaned on aristocratic lineage, Temujin appealed to those who had lived on the margins as he once had, those weary of the rigid hierarchies that govern the tribes. Still, Temujin's greatest desire took shape not merely as a bid for leadership, but as a quest to reclaim what had been taken from him and his family. Tribal lawlessness had fractured his childhood. Loyalty and justice became the foundation on which he sought to build a new order. To do so, he would need to assert authority over a land defined by rivalry. His ascent would inevitably confront the tribes and leaders who once wronged him, among them the Teachiad, who had imprisoned him as a youth, and the Merkit, who had abducted his wife Bert in a rage shortly after their marriage. Historical narratives describe Temujin's rescue of Bert with the aid of allies as one of his earliest decisive actions, one shaped by both devotion and vengeance. The obstacle before him was immense. The Mongolian plateau in the late 12th century was a landscape of deeply rooted divisions. Tribes fought for scarce resources, honor, and survival. Leadership was tenuous, and the idea of uniting the steppe under a single authority had been attempted before but not sustained. Temujin faced not just the might of more powerful clans, but the entrenched belief that order could never rise above tradition. Many aristocratic families viewed him with suspicion, questioning his legitimacy and rejecting the alliances he forged with common herders and former servants. Conflict deepened when Jamaka declared himself the rightful leader of the steppe aristocracy, sparking a prolonged cycle of battles that would test Temujin's resolve. Some historians believe their rivalry encapsulated two competing visions for Mongolia's future, one rooted in hereditary privilege, another in broader loyalty forged through merit. The wars between their factions were marked by shifting allegiances, dramatic ambushes, and a relentless contest of will. Temujin's military skill grew with each engagement. He reorganized his followers into units based on loyalty rather than blood ties, a structural change that historians see as vital to his eventual success. Yet revenge, particularly against those who had once endangered or humiliated his family, remained a powerful undercurrent guiding his actions. A turning point emerged in the late 1190s and early 1200s. Records suggest that Temujin began to unify not only people, but principles. He insisted on discipline within his ranks and enforced rules intended to curb internal violence, theft, and retribution outside his command. This imposition of order, rare in the steppe's chaotic political culture, attracted more supporters who sought stability. The shift was gradual but unmistakable. Temujin's reputation for both justice and firmness spread, and the balance of power tilted in his favor. Some chroniclers portray this period as the moment when personal vengeance evolved into a broader campaign to reshape Mongolian society itself. The final break with Jamaka came as Temujin defeated one rival faction after another. After a decisive clash around 1206, Jamaka was captured. Accounts differ on the exact details, but it's widely recorded that Jamaka refused to rejoin Temujin and asked for a death that would spare his body from dishonor. Temujin granted the request in what some historians interpret as a final gesture of respect to a former friend, closing a chapter of conflict that had defined his early life. With Jamaka gone and the major tribes subdued or allied, Temujin stood as the singular leader capable of uniting the steppe. In the spring of 1206, at a grand assembly known as the Kurultai, the chiefs and nobles of Mongolia proclaimed him Genghis Khan, a title often interpreted as universal ruler. The ceremony, held near the source of the Anan River where his life had begun, symbolized a full circle, one marked by hardship, endurance, and a quest for restitution that had broadened into a sweeping vision. The newly given title affirmed his authority over a confederation that had once seemed impossible to gather. Some accounts suggest that he accepted the honor with solemnity rather than triumph, aware that the unity he forged would require constant vigilance. Yet even as he assumed the role of Genghis Khan, the roots of his rise were never far from view. The new laws he enacted, later known as the Yasa, reflected the scars of his youth, the need for loyalty, the protection of families, and strict punishment for betrayal. He emphasized the distribution of resources based on service rather than ancestry, a principle that challenged older aristocratic traditions. His system rewarded individuals from all backgrounds, including those who, like his own family long before, had known abandonment. This approach widened his support and strengthened the structure of his growing empire. With internal unity secured, Genghis Khan turned his attention outward. His early campaigns beyond Mongolia, against the Tangut kingdom of Western Xia, and later the Jin dynasty, were driven not only by geopolitical strategy, but also by a desire to safeguard his people from the threats that neighboring powers had historically posed. Some historians propose that these external expansions were a continuation of his early need to ensure security through strength. Others contend that his ambitions had evolved into a broader quest for dominance and order. Whatever the motivations, his early victories demonstrated a combination of discipline, adaptability, and relentless drive. The result of his rise was a transformation that reshaped not only Mongolia, but much of Eurasia. By the time of his death in 1227, Genghis Khan had laid the foundation for the largest contiguous land empire in recorded history. His legacy would be interpreted in many ways, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with deep sorrow for the destruction wrought in his campaigns. Yet his ascent, built upon personal loss, loyalty, reform, and the unification of fractured tribes, became a turning point that altered centuries of human movement, trade, warfare, and cultural exchange. For all its vast historical consequence, the beginning of this story remains grounded in the quiet determination of a boy who once felt the sting of betrayal on an empty field. From that moment, shaped by the memory of those who wronged him and the family he struggled to protect, rose a leader whose actions would ripple far beyond the windswept plains of the Mongolian steppe. His journey, part vengeance, part vision, stands as one of history's starkest reminders of how a single life, forged in adversity, can redirect the path of nations and generations yet to come.